Hey, we're living in an era of free speech prohibition, and we're here at a speakeasy where we're doing the forbidden things, the verboten things. We're having two people have a civilized conversation, someone from the right and someone from the left. Now, I know people on the right are seeing these two people and going, oh, you have a sane person from our side and some lunatic. And the people on the left are saying, oh, you have a sane person from our side and some lunatic. They're both wrong. In both cases, we have human beings with valid things to say and a lot of things in common. I'm going to try to re-merge the country and have people have decent conversations again. But that's forbidden, so shh. Come on. Gentlemen, I see you're already been taken care of. I'll be your bartender for the duration of this hour. I want to start with discussing what you both have in common. And I think you both are for reparations, is that true?
Yes, in principle, as long as the money's spent in fairly specific ways, but yes.
Well, I think that's true, especially if we define what we mean by reparations, the truth of the past, keeping track of the suffering, humanizing both those who suffer as well as those who perpetuate the suffering, because to engage in suffering is a human thing. Domination is a human thing. Fighting against domination is a human thing. But then the question becomes like tort law, how do you repair? So in that sense, I think we overlap, but I think we have some very deep similarities.
I don't know that that's remotely the most interesting thing we have in common.
Yeah, exactly. I think
and I know that just from us both ordering cognac when we sat down.
No, but I think part of it has to do with that both my dear brother and myself, though, we have a commitment to how do we understand Western civilization, how do we understand Europe, how do we understand America. We're able to keep track of both the ideals as well as the crimes, but also be able to have a role of the comic and the humorous, even as we try to keep track, given our agreements or deep disagreements about whatever we understand domination to be, whatever we understand oppression to be. But this sense of being deeply shaped by Socratic legacies of Athens, being shaped by Enlightenment, being shaped by Romanticism, we're just talking about Oscar Wilde and his genius, and being shaped by the US experiment. The commitment on the one hand to liberty and freedom, wrestling with treatment of indigenous peoples, wrestling with working people, wrestling with gays and lesbians and trans, wrestling with blacks and browns, but also recognizing that it's shot through each and every one of us, the best as well as the worst.
But so much of this sounds like ethereal rhetoric. I feel like the right and the left, one of the differences is the left says something that sounds reasonable, like the legacy of slaves, they should get some compensation. You go, yeah, I guess that sounds okay. But then the right will say who, when, where does it come from, how does it carried out?
There's this sort of venal, thin, mean specificity about a lot of Republican discourse and a lot of the way they respond to arguments. And you can make sophisticated and persuasive and beautiful responses to things without saying how much, who, when, and who's going to pay for it. You can talk about whether the right way to deal with historic, lots of black scholars, lots of white progressive scholars, they will talk about trauma being encoded in the body even of black people who live today, right? And certainly in the structures and all the rest of it. Now, there are very powerful arguments against that, but you don't hear them very often from the right. You more typically will hear, silly, you will hear, not silly, but you will hear stuff like, well, why should I pay for something I didn't do, And there are much more interesting conversations that we don't have because it's not really, there's not really a format in which it's permissible. Cable news is a car crash, People don't really read books, even young engaged voters, people who really care about things don't really read books. A sort of atomized, Twitterized world. There isn't really room for this, and even on the rare occasion that you get somebody who is a, dyed-in-the-wool leftist, socialist, whatever, should they want to debate somebody from the other side, their own universities, in many cases, or the students at those universities won't permit them because they can't bear the idea that a persuasive, intelligent, amusing, conservative, or even just a libertarian might be on campus. So I hear you in the sense of that's typically what we're used to the responses sounding like. I think it's a shame, and I think it's unnecessary.
Well, we just have to have more serious debates and substantive dialogues between left and right, between people who have deep philosophical and political disagreements, but also people who do overlap in terms of wanting to engage each other, learn and listen, but also respect to the degree to which we're able to scrutinize, to unleash the kind of Socratic energy that's necessary.
Right.
And yet at the same time recognize, we're going to fight for people's right to be wrong. We're going to fight for people's right to disagree. And sometimes the classes will be ugly, sometimes it'll be less ugly. You hope they will be humane, but we have to have more and more spaces where left and right, and by left and right, I don't mean milquetoast liberal. I don't mean milquetoast conservative.
No, we mean people who disagree in the most fundamental terms about the way society should be organized.
But then you recognize they also have overlap too.
Yeah.
Hi, this is Anthony Cumia,
Hello, I'm Gavin McInnes.
and together we're Compound Censored.
And we would like you to subscribe with this deal using this promo code right below me right now.
Do it, because it's very entertaining.
They really do.
And we only forget, you can only forget this if your brain is organized along politically partisan lines, where everyone feels the need to fall in line along economic imperatives. It's like, I won't get a job with the Republican Party, or I won't get a contributorship of Fox unless I fall in line with all this stuff that, if you were to really ask me honestly, I don't believe. I have met people who are from, the furthest left imaginable on my travels, and I have met moderates, and I've met people I consider to be more right-wing than me. There are some. And 50% of what all these people believe, they pretty much have in common. It's a different 50% with every different combination. But the idea that we live in this Manichaean, and this is an Enlightenment invention, which we as Christians know a little bit, but we know better, really.
It goes back to Zoroaster. It goes back
right,
to
but it's the Enlightenment that brings in. It's the Enlightenment that brings in the real kind of like good, evil, dark, light. And this is what gives rise to This is getting rid of the messiness, like the Chesterton would be talking about, the inherent contradictions and eddies of Catholicism.
I'm glad you invoked
right?
Gilbert Keith.
The greatest.
Chesterton,
the greatest.
My God.
The greatest.
Orthodoxy. September 1908. That is a classic.
It is one of my favorite books.
Is that right?
Yet another thing we have in common.
There we go.
Classic among classic.
No, it's spellbinding. And it is up there with the Mona Lisa or Der des Nibelungen in terms of things that you return to and see something new and find something new. And at different stages in your life, it will speak to you in different ways. And Chesterton does that very well. Orthodoxy does it especially well. But he's talking about these inherent little contradictions in he's talking about Catholicism specifically, but Christianity more generally. And
he hadn't become a Catholic yet. He's still an Anglican.
But he's talking about
what's
great about
Catholic
Catholicism without having bought it.
Absolutely right. And he's on his way.
Right.
Right. He's on his way to Rome.
But it's the Enlightenment that crushes all this out. In large part. But this is what makes space for the sort of
You remember how he ends that book, though? He ends that book by talking about the open mouths and the shouting cries of those in the Gothic cathedral.
The gargoyles and stuff.
Exactly. Remember that?
But this is where he's talking about laughter and war. It's sort of resounding through the cathedrals. We set bellum, right?
How Jesus hides his mirth. He doesn't hide his anger. He doesn't hide his love. Jesus weeps. Socrates never cries. Jesus weeps, but he never laughs.
Yes, but that is true. Yes, but the medieval church saw through it, which is why the gargoyles that he's talking about, that Chesterton's talking about, you look at any Gothic cathedral, any church, the gargoyles, they have their doodahs out in their hands, they're pulling faces, they're laughing. And medieval Christianity is, people are always about to burst into song, or always about to laugh, always about to sing, always about to crack a smile and tell a joke. This is Chaucer, exactly. Right? This is Chaucer.
Himself, the greatest comic writer we have in the English language.
But then we get to the Enlightenment, and then we get to this sort of funless, anodyne, bleak.
Voltaire's got jokes. Lichtenberg's got jokes.
Not very good ones. Not as good as ours.
But you agree the laughter's there.
No, they're sort of thin. They're thin, aren't they? They're thin.
It's not Aristophanes, though. It's
right,
not,
but this stuff all disappears in the Enlightenment, and then we have then we have the horrors of Vatican II trying to re-inject Christianity into relevance because the world has become this Wittgensteinian, logic-driven, dull, bleak, joyless hell. which gives rise to Stalin and Hitler.
Do you think that's where we are now, in a sense?
Of course.
Comedy is dead.
This is
Like
why
you're
we
talking
got
about
to
the
defend
Socratic
the comic. You got to defend the comic now. You defend the Socratic, the comic, and the tragic comic. I mean, you got to defend blues, you got to defend Chekhov. But the point that my brother's making about the erasure of the humorous and the comic, which is not just the funny and the humorous, because it cuts deeper than that. It's talking about
comedy leads into
incongruity.
tragedy, and comedy leads into tragedy. You've got irony, paradox, and contradiction, all of which take us into Chesterton, take us into the real soul of Christianity, and take us into suffering, take us into finding out what it means to make it through this miserable existence.
Just be human. We were talking about the death sentence in space and time that Kafka talks about.
And you do not hear in modern political debates anyone talk about what would make somebody happier. Think about, women after the Second World War. Their position in society has, and I don't think any reasonable person could plausibly claim otherwise, women's position in society has improved dramatically.
It was so bad. It was so bad.
Sure. And we can all,
nowhere to go, but
I do have a nostalgic. There's a little nostalgic thing in my brain. It's like 1950s was the place to be, really. But I know that
it was a tough time.
But I don't know I'd survive the veil of ignorance in the 50s, right? So maybe not. But you don't hear. So women's place in society, right? More of them go to college now.
The progress has been real.
But they've been getting progressively more miserable, not happier. Every 10 years, women report themselves more generally unhappy with life, more depressed, more, I
think that's since the sort of Steinem feminism. I think before that they said you can get out of the kitchen if you want. And then with Gloria Steinem it said get out of the kitchen no matter what, get a career.
Well, it's taken freedom. It's taken some freedom away for sure. But I don't think it's the compulsion to work that has made women unhappy. I think it is setting up unrealistic expectations for themselves of what they can accomplish, which was set up by Steinem and by other people, but really is not quite the 60s all sex is rape feminism. It was more the 80s, 90s you can have it all feminism.
So you don't think it's career related?
Of course it's career related, but the really damaging, lasting, immiserating feminism didn't actually happen in the 60s and 70s. As destructive as some of that stuff was, it was the Sex and the City feminism. Because this is what has
be a slut feminist.
Yeah, but this is what encouraging women to behave like men.
That's top-down feminism, usually on vanilla sides of town.
Yes,
for the most part, but it's a question of class. It's a question of class and income and money.
It's wealthy white women.
It's wealthy
white women, and it is wealthy white women. And this doesn't make ordinary women, and especially doesn't make lower socioeconomic group women very happy. And you just don't hear anybody on television saying, okay, so all this stuff has happened, why are women so miserable? And what can we do to fix their levels of happiness?
But you know what, brother, I think the brothers of all colors are miserable too. I mean, the kind of society that we have is so much rotten decadence and decline in it that if you're trying to conform yourself to it, no matter what color or what gender or what sexual orientation, the notions of success, the wonderful essay by Tennessee Williams, The Catastrophe of Success. Yeah. Powerful, he wrote that right after Glass Menagerie.
Right.
That if your conception of success is just prosperity, financial and material gain, then you're going to end up soulless, empty.
Yes. Do you think, despite the censoriousness, the censorship that's happening with comedians, and I would say especially on the political right...
This is the sad thing we were talking about.
Yeah, you guys were talking about this before we started rolling.
That's right.
And I don't know where you position yourself on this, but you presumably would agree that it is currently coming down against...
libertarian sensibilities. We got to have what the Greeks call parrhesia.
Do you think it's the very best or the very worst time to be an iconoclast? Because it seems to me that the only people who are really happy, despite the inclement weather, let's say, despite the many challenges that someone like you or someone like me will face, we can't go on social networks, it's difficult to raise money, can't reach our fans, whatever. I'm happy. I mean, I don't know about you, but I'm happy. I wake up every morning and I'm like, what are they going to throw at me today? It seems to me like...
what is the source of your happiness? Where does that come from?
Well, maybe partly because I have love in my life, but that
makes a difference too.
It does, but that didn't come until I kind of embraced not wanting to conform anymore and not needing to be part of any clubs and not wanting to go to the right dinner parties.
Love is more mysterious than that, though.
Well,
It comes and goes. It's almost
this is a mixture of...
Is that right? Love is mysterious.
It is gay love.
And so it's not real love. It's not real love. It's not real love. It's not real love. It's It's not like a man and a woman. It's not real love. It's just fags.
It's just love.
You don't have to worry about your daughters getting into this school. You don't have to assimilate.
Are you out of your mind? Do you know how
society.
status conscious homosexuals are? Do you know the stresses and challenges and
You
pressures?
like the danger.
No,
I don't
but
want
when
my
you
wife
inherit
crying.
when you inherit a stepson and you're thinking, well, he wasn't on the path to Harvard, but he better be now. Do you and I don't just have
A lot of pressure.
I don't know. Of course. What am I going to? What am I going to tell my? Where am I going to tell my friends he's going to school?
We have more pressure than you.
No, you get to craft
You
your
guys
child
can
from birth. You
dance
can
around
read,
in red leather short shorts. No one cares.
Once upon a time, that may have appealed to me, but these days I feel there are all kinds of horrendous pressures on gay people who aren't mental or who aren't really stupid, because all of what used to be transgressive gay culture. I mean, Black America still has it, although it is becoming corporatized.
Even that is getting assimilated,
it is,
corporatized, commodified.
But they still have it. They
it's
shut
still-
down
it's still
campuses.
there.
Black Lives
It's
Matter.
still there.
This is raising hell. You know,
still there.
this
But
is still
you
raising hell.
would agree, too.
Gays do not raise
But
hell
you have to
anymore. I
draw
mean,
a
they have
distinction
floats
between,
sponsored by Mercedes, and that's it. You know, like
Gays
do not
grew
raise
up
hell
being
anymore.
freaks, so they don't have this compulsion to assimilate the way that normal people do.
You just can't get it out yourself, can you? Just can't let it go.
No, but it can cut the other way because you've been excluded for so long. You can't wait to be included.
And I think
it
a lot
goes
of
both
and I think
ways.
a lot.
But the lesbian sisters and the precious trans folk, they have even more pressure, especially socioeconomically.
Are they precious? Are they especially precious?
Oh yes, they are. Oh, I'm
Why
a
are they
Christian.
precious?
Because they made in the image of God, my brother.
Well, everybody is, but that doesn't
That's
make them
precious.
Well, of course, but
That's
everybody's precious then.
Yes, that's true.
Okay, but
That's true.
you just want to point it out, especially in that case.
No, I think everybody's precious.
I'm just asking.
No, that's true. I think everybody's
Is
precious.
Trump precious?
Oh yes, he's made in the image of God. He's just wrong.
Closer than any of the rest of us.
He's
in
just
fact.
evilly wrong. I mean, he's my foe, but I mean, he's still a human being.
Let's ask about Trump for a sec. Sorry.
Sure.
Number one reason Trump is in office, in your view, what do you think the number one? Just make one simple phrase or sentence. Why is Trump in office?
The inability of neoliberal elites to deliver to working classes, which allowed Trump to gain access to them. And as the neoliberal center collapsed, it was either going to be left populism, my dear brother Bernie Sanders.
Right.
He would have won if the Clinton people had not treated him unfairly.
Well, no.
Oh, I'm telling you.
No. Sanders, Trump. Come on now. That would have put socialism back 40 years.
Well, maybe we'll have another
That would have been the
I
most
don't
humiliating
know.
defeat in
Well,
American
I
electoral
don't
history.
know about that.
Well, no, because
He
Sanders
had the
is no longer
enthusiasm,
credible.
he had the momentum, he had the motion.
Look, I think there's a lot in common.
But all
between
this is
Sanders
hypothetical, of course.
a lot in common between Sanders and Trump voters.
Oh, sure. Or at least a slice of them.
A slice of it, which is perhaps
Right,
why a fifth.
right.
They said that a fifth of the Sanders voters went over to Trump, and you can understand if they're primarily motivated by the anti-elite,
Yeah, it was anti-Hillary that brought them.
There's a liberal arrogance, there's a liberal self-righteousness, there's a liberal haughtiness that everyday people revolted against.
So your answer to the Trump question is economic.
Well, in part.
Primarily.
It was also a white backlash against Obama. There's no doubt about that. But that is one
think
factor
so?
among others. Oh, no, that's one factor among
really think
others.
so?
That there's a slice.
Okay.
I think people have often viewed that as the sole factor. I disagree with that.
It's
I disagree with
ob-
that.
What about all the white people? What about the Obama voters who voted for Trump? They were backlashing against
Because there are a lot of
themselves?
people who voted for both, especially in those places that he won in that he wasn't expected
for
to, right?
those
The Michigan
particular
places.
ones, the Obama people who voted for Trump, they were the ones who were victimized by the neoliberal elites that
During that
generated
decade.
grotesque wealth inequality. You see.
Weren't you one of those? Like, weren't you someone who was mad at Barack Obama and felt betrayed by him?
Absolutely. The tide of Wall Street, the drones dropping bombs on innocent people, the surveillance. See, I got a libertarian sensibility. This notion of keeping us under control and surveillance and so forth is something I had serious concerns about. And even within the black context. I mean, you got a Black Lives Matter movement among a black president, black Homeland Security cabinet member, and black attorney general.
Right, but
They're
this
not
is
coming through. They didn't deliver.
But you see,
from
this
that.
is what you've hinted at is my problem with your analysis.
Okay, let me hear.
Because white-black backlash against, you got me interested up to that point. But Obama, I don't know about that. Could be.
But he was as symbol though, as symbol.
Was he really?
I mean, he wasn't Malcolm X. We know that.
No, but was
I mean,
he that shorthand? Was he that proxy for a variety of impulses and attitudes that white working class America hated? I'm not sure about that.
All the
I'm not
vicious,
sure about that.
demonizing symbols of Brother Barack Obama were circulating.
Just look at what Republican
That's every
women
president.
get. Obama,
no, but this was racist, though.
Yeah, but Obama.
This one was racist.
Okay, but Obama
with
got
monkeys and all this kind of
Obama got a
ugly
fraction
apes and
of
all
what,
this stuff,
and Coulter gets every week.
Well,
you know,
no,
I mean,
but it's a different kind of demonizing. Demonizing in general, I'm against.
Absolutely.
But it's a different kind of demonizing, you see.
Perhaps, and I think maybe for some voters there was Obama was used as a proxy, as a shorthand, right? But it seems to me really that this was happening
and the economic issue
class is
what I want to accent here, because Obama had a moment where he had Wall Street against the wall.
Yeah.
And he had the meeting, and what did he tell them?
Have some
he
money.
said, I stand between you and the pitchforks. I will protect you. I'm on your side. Now, from my point of view, that's what you say to working people.
Yeah.
That's what
Let
you say
them
to poor
burn.
people.
Let the banks burn.
Well, no, they're human beings. They're still human beings over there, but they've been greedy.
Yeah.
And they've been involved in crimes.
And
how many of the executives went to jail?
He
But
did.
conservatives
He helped to
furious about
excuse
that.
them from the consequences.
Absolutely.
Right,
He absolved them. And
So-
here he's talking about when he goes to Morehouse and he says, I want you black people to pull your pants up and take personal responsibility. Then he goes to Wall Street. He doesn't talk about personal responsibility. They get off the hook.
Right.
He does
Too
have
big
that
to
thing
fail.
that
So there's
Democrats.
going to be a populism. In responding to that, it's going to be right-wing populism. It's going to be left-wing populism.
He does have that problem that all Democrats have, and some Republicans, of course, do it too with
Yeah,
pandering,
yeah.
but Democrats especially. You know, when you see Hillary, sticking on her Southern accent, all the rest of it, Democrats seem to have this problem especially.
Yeah.
For me, though, the thing with Obama wasn't race so much as manliness. I mean, Trump is the sort of walking embodiment of the heroic masculine virtues we haven't seen in public life for a really long time.
Brother Harvey Mansfield's written about this. His book on manliness.
With all of his many obvious faults and shortcomings, and he has many of them. I hate that he doesn't read books, but it's just obviously not part of his DNA, right?
That's true.
And that's okay.
How in the world did he get through University of
We're
Pennsylvania?
not trying, but we're not trying. We're not voting for. We're not voting for Jesus. We're voting for a president. Trying to get heaven on earth is a Marxist thing, and it's doomed to failure and disaster. But that's another conversation.
I'd agree there never be heaven on earth,
right,
but things can still get better, especially
we're gonna
for
get
poor
to
and
that,
working
by the
people.
way.
Of course.
All right,
But
we're getting
there.
you don't have.
right.
This is the mistake that a lot of the evangelical conservative authors made, but evangelical voters did not. Which is, we're voting for a president. We're not voting for a pope, right? So despite all of his many shortcomings, he seemed to embody virtues that had been missing from public life. I mean, Obama was weak in many respects, not fulfilling in promises, policy, all the rest of it. He seemed also to be quite a weak and effeminate man.
He
Wasn't a good man.
He was a good father. He was a good husband.
Was he really? I mean, he's clearly completely
He
dominated by his wife and his
precious
daughters.
He loves them to death.
Okay,
He
but
loves
loving
his
them to
wife
death is not all that is required in being a father. Sometimes
one-
as a
that's
father,
one
you
thing.
have to
That's
say
one thing.
no. Sometimes as a father, you have to say this isn't in your best interest and I'm not going to let you do it.
But I'm sure he probably said that.
I doubt it. I doubt it. I think it's obvious.
It's hard to say.
It's pretty-
we don't know.
It's pretty obvious who makes the rules in that household,
But back
isn't
to
it?
your point. Back to your point.
But it's
the contrast
the
between
strength,
Trump
the bravery,
as a
the
kind of
fortitude.
patriarchal man who pushes and tries to get things
and
done.
it wasn't just
But
men
it's
who
so
wanted one of
cold
those.
and
But it wasn't.
callous
But it wasn't
and-
just men who wanted one of those. It was women too, wasn't it? Because lots and lots and lots of women voted for him. And if you could.
Well, 53% of white sisters voted
And if
for
you-
Donald Trump.
And if you think about how relentlessly they painted him as this horrific, sexist, misogynist dinosaur monster, you would imagine that women would be quite turned off by that. If that hadn't been one of the primary attack lines from the press, maybe it would have been 63 or 73%. What this tells us is it isn't just men who want a
that's
man
true.
in the Oval Office.
That's true.
And-
But keep in mind, patriarchal ideology cuts through the hearts, minds, and souls of men and women.
Absolutely, but
And is it bad?
I would say
Patriarchy bad?
agreed, and it's fabulous. And it's fabulous.
No. I think for the most part it is bad, though.
But-
because you're losing sight of the humanity, creativity, intelligence, imagination of majority of humankind, of women.
Just by saying that men have a natural aptitude to certain roles in civilization and society?
No, it's just that patriarchy in its dominant forms does tend to dehumanize
Okay, but we don't
women.
have that in America. Right?
I don't know about that.
Clearly the patriarchy is
Doesn't it
not
just create
in
order?
its dominant form. I mean, patriarchy, as we have seen it expressed in the West,
if Donald
has
Trump
done
is a
almost
dominant
nothing
form.
but good things.
But if Donald Trump is a dominant form, he's
Is
talking
he a
about
dominant?
grabbing a
Is
woman.
he a dominant form? No,
Oh, he made a joke.
Come on. He said he did not say that he assaults anybody. He said, let's be completely honest and strict and rigorous about it, okay?
Let's get the facts right.
Completely honest and rigorous and strict. The clear meaning of his words is, when you are a rich and famous celebrity, women throw themselves at you. That was the meaning
And
of
they
his
do
words.
let you
Now,
grab
that's
them
true.
by the
What's
pussy.
subjective about that? Just
No,
because
but
he used the word
where's
pussy?
the grabbing. That's the
He
violation.
said they let you grab
They
them by the
let you.
pussy.
He said
do.
they let you. So
They do.
he's expressing a rambunctious and aggressive male sexuality, but he's phrasing it in the language of what? Consent.
Yeah, but
And
he's saying
in the joke.
And a joke. Okay,
no. We understand joke and comedy, but the thing is this: there's ways of expressing that. But when he says they let you grab, and that's viewed as just aggressive sexuality,
And
no,
it feels like
that's
a
it's
violation.
more of a hump.
That's
It's not
violation.
violation if she, quote, lets you do it. Like, it's the opposite of that. I mean, we're suggesting that women have no desire for aggressive male sexual partners. I think we all know that's not true.
No,
Like,
I hear what you're saying there, though. But
Speaking as a lady, I can, like,
No.
They like it rough
I see
sometimes.
what
We're
you're
all-
all saying there.
Look,
I see what you're saying there.
what he's-
But the thing is, because that particular statement is tied to a host of other
Well, it's used.
Sure, that's
it's,
how it
statements and
yes,
actions.
and it is used.
Because you all make a
as-
good point on that particular.
But here's the thing,
set of
it's
words,
used
it can
as
be
the
stretched out
It's
and
used
so
as
forth.
the
I'll give you
zenith.
that.
It's
But
used as the
this
apotheosis.
takes us
It's
so-
used as the worst example. If that's
Right.
the worst you've got on Donald Trump, you have nothing on Donald Trump.
Okay,
Bill
let's-
Clinton.
You guys are agreeing too much. Straight question. Is
Yes.
Donald Trump racist?
No evidence.
Well, I think you got to draw a distinction between racist effect and consequence, racist motivation and intention. When he calls my dear sister Maxine Waters low IQ, that to me is racist and
But she
sexist.
is, though.
No, she
She's
isn't.
quite-
I know her. She's a brilliant
why?
woman.
But she comes across as stupid.
But I don't know why that's.
And what you're suggesting is it's
that
not
never
okay to
occurred
call her-
me.
but it's
That
a-
never occurred to me that she's stupid. She's a brilliant woman.
Maybe because you know her personally.
Well,
Maybe because she has a PR problem. All of that could be true.
Yeah,
but what you're
yeah.
suggesting is that
But
it's
I
not
just-
okay to call a black female politician stupid. And it
But
has to
low
be.
IQ. That's different than stupid.
It is a little
The
loaded.
history-
It's a little charged.
But you all know the history
It's a little
of using
implies
IQ
blacks
against
have lower
people.
IQs.
Absolutely.
Yes.
It's a little charged.
And we've had
right?
debates
But
with Brother
sometimes-
Charles Murray
but
on
he-
this, going
but-
back to
but he
his
has
text.
also
He and I
called-
used to go at it on this issue.
It is
right?
charged, but Trump has called people who are not black low IQ as well. And in
Yeah,
fact,
remember-
this is one of the
Who
things
else has he called low IQ?
you may
all know?
remember this better than me, but
I
this is
don't.
something he does use against
I don't
people.
But
follow
some
him
people
as
get in
closely.
trouble for not being racist. For example, there was that guy recently who said,
feel like that's
who said the prince and the princess are bringing home the new baby, Meghan Markle, and he had a picture of them, and it was an old 1920s picture of the Queen bringing home a little monkey.
Oh.
And the guy who made the joke, it never occurred to him, the monkey thing.
You know,
so he
the
was,
way you
or there was
just-
another ESPN guy
But
who
that
said,
has
Danny,
a racist.
Jeremy-
Well, you know, the
Yeah.
way he just told it sounded damning, but I was
Yeah.
in England when that story broke, like a week or
didn't
two ago.
occur to him.
And actually, I believe the guy. He's a comic. He is no evidence ever of showing any kind of prejudice whatsoever against anyone ever. I believe him when he just thought it was a funny picture, and it didn't even occur to
Okay,
him.
better example.
Jeremy,
Yeah.
Jeremy
the way you
Lin,
told it
right?
did not help your side.
Jeremy
But here you go. But you
in that
know the
case-
individual, and
Well,
so
I've
that
met him
because
and-
anybody who would just hear that, given the
If it's always on
association,
your
Right,
mind,
like,
but
if it's
I-
always going
I-
through your mind.
no, but
It's
white
the
white
lesson
supremacy
success-
is
No
so
one's called a black
pervasive.
person
No,
monkey
but
forever.
It's so
That's from the
pervasive.
30s.
People don't use the N-word. People do not call black people
But there's
monkeys.
other ways.
It doesn't happen.
But there's
and
other
when
ways
somebody,
in which it's articulated
right, of
and
course,
expressed.
I agree with you.
And that's true for homophobia,
Let me-
it's
let
true
me
for
please give you
anti-Jewish,
two more examples, two more examples.
anti-Arab,
Two more
anti-Muslim.
examples.
I agree.
No, two other examples.
Remember the coolest-
Anti-Muslim, I'm absolutely comfortable with.
Remember-
but
No, Muslims are precious too.
no, they gave up their precious.
Okay, hold on.
They gave up their precious.
Before we lose this point
But your Christian
We'll come back to- we'll
doesn't
come back to-
allow you to do that.
No, that makes me a bad Christian to believe it. I'm sure.
But you know, Jesus doesn't say love everybody but Muslims.
He would
said
if
love
he
everybody.
would have.
No,
There weren't any Muslims when he was alive.
You got two other examples.
There weren't any Muslims when he was alive.
No, not true. But he's preparing us to love everybody.
Your tangent is better than my point, but my point is
That's a good.
I'm gonna keep that in the chamber.
H&M puts out a sweater, a shirt, and it has a black in it. It says the coolest monkey in the jungle. Huge backlash. It had never occurred to the
the mom,
to the
the
mom,
photographer,
the mom,
yeah.
or the ESPN. They write about Jeremy Lin. They go the chink in the armor, and he goes,
yeah.
"It never occurred to me." So I think sometimes the left has racism on the brain so severely that they imbue it on someone else. I don't think Roseanne Barr knew that Valerie Jarrett was black.
I didn't. You know, if you'd asked me and I hadn't
Valerie
really
Jarrett's
thought
been
about
associated with Brother Barack Obama for 8 years. She reads the newspapers all
If
the
you-
time. She
if
knows
you-
Valerie's
Doesn't look
black.
black to me though.
Well, she's a light-skinned sister.
If
She's
you
a black
had asked
sister.
me,
She's just light-skinned.
I don't know that I would have been able to say with any certainty that she was black, Valerie
She looks
Jarrett.
a
If
Did
you
you
asked me-
think that she was a white sister for
I mean-
8 years?
I mean, if I
You
thought-
read about it. You all read the
yeah, but they
newspaper.
never
all
know
the time.
if I thought about it for ages, but not if I were just racing off a funny tweet.
A quick,
Exactly.
No, something like
I
that.
think
I
it's
agree.
very
I agree
plausible
with
that it
I
wouldn't have
agree with
occurred
that.
to me. I
But
don't-
you all, maybe somebody who's been in the public life that long, they would know she's.
I mean, yes and no. The guy in Britain who posted the picture with the Queen
Well,
and
he's
the
different.
monkey,
He's
whatever.
different.
He works
He's
for the
different.
BBC. You know, this is like this is
different,
as woke as it gets in Britain. You know, and I completely believe that it did not cross his mind. And this is somebody who has been working as a comic and a journalist for 45 years.
No, see,
so he does fall into the category of suggesting.
I accept that formulation.
So
I think it's a little different
the
with
bigger issue
with
here is
Roseanne.
when
Roseanne's
we-
a very talented artist. There's no doubt about that.
I don't think that Roseanne Barr is a racist, but I do find her explanation for that particular tweet a little bit more difficult to accept than the other two examples. To be really honest with you, I'm going to be frank. It's a little bit harder to swallow, just a little bit. It could still be true.
Racist anymore. I think
don't think
it
so.
has been racist since the 80s.
No, institutional racism.
He's very out of date, you see, because what you mean by racism is very out of touch.
I can jump in my car right now and try to make it to the airport and police pull me over. Is that racism? Of course, in part it is.
You see,
Racial profiling is racism. Stop and frisk is racism.
Absolutely.
I don't think that you would get pulled over if they could see you.
not if you
I
they could
get
see
pulled
if
over
they
all
could
the time.
if they could see how you were dressed, surely.
Well, you'd be surprised. You'd be surprised.
And didn't
If
they
you-
determine that stop and frisk in New York actually stopped whites more than they occur in the crime
Because the police are
stats?
so terrified of the.
We went to jail. Carl Dix of the Revolutionary Communist Party, and myself and a host of others, we went to jail to make sure that Michael Bloomberg, who was in the mayor, right, he already sent 4 million people to jail as a result of stop and frisk. 3% committed crimes, not just disproportionately black and brown, almost 75, 80%. You see, I mean, that's a
No, my
tilt.
understanding on that
Now, the
stat was-
irony is, of course, that includes black and brown policemen too.
There's quite a lot of stuff going
Because
on
they
in
get
there.
socialized in the
Because you're
police
saying-
department to look at black people in a certain way. White supremacy is inside black
and
people.
so do-
it's inside white people. It's inside brown.
So you
Absolutely.
read the new
Police are following a pattern, and blacks commit disproportionately more crime.
but not that disproportionate.
not certain
amount.
certain
Not
kinds
that
of crime, and not to that
commit
level.
50% of violent crime in America.
Okay, so look, I don't have too much of a problem with profiling or with stop and search because stop and frisk, as you call it over here, because I'm quite strong on law and order when it works.
No,
but there's a lot else going on in what you said,
friends,
right?
You got black
Well, but
partners, you got black
of course.
companions.
Got a black husband.
Now, when they,
I was
I know,
gonna say-
but when your precious one, when he gets pulled over and they mistreat him, and he says what? He says, "Loved one, it was racist to me." What do you say? What do you say?
Does he say that?
I mean, and we're just talking hypothetically.
He's been driving a gold Tesla through, Miami, and the Hispanic cops down there do not like black people very much. Like a lot of Hispanics do not like black people very much.
See, that's racism too, my brother.
Sounds like it.
Look, that's racism.
I don't run into a lot of white people who use the N-word or who have particularly.
Not in that form. That's true.
But I lived in South Florida for 2.5 years, and my goodness, the attitudes among the Hispanics pouring over the border to say nothing of the economic impacts on Black America, but the attitudinal impacts on Black America. And this is why I think people sometimes say that the Republicans are stupid and the Democrats are evil, because Republicans may be ignorant and behind the times and out of date. Like your definition of racism, you don't know. It doesn't mean bad people doing mean things.
What does it mean?
Well, so you read Robin DiAngelo's book, right? The White Fragility, which is a silly, frivolous, frothy thing.
I've never read it, but I've heard about it.
It's a frothy thing, but it explains that racism.
Beacon Press, my beloved press. We go right ahead.
Right. So it says that racism is not what you think it is. It's not mean people who have prejudice against blacks or some other group, exercising that prejudice by denying them opportunities or calling them names. No, that's just discrimination. Racism is a structure of oppression which runs like a red thread through the institutions of society, pops up as a character in history.
Give me an example of it popping up.
Well, so the golden example is always law enforcement, right? Which disproportionately,
But you got job discrimination, residential
job discrimination.
That's real.
All right, so here I am.
That's real.
Yes,
I work at a
that
company.
can be real.
That can be very real.
I saw
That can
this
be real.
application. Cornel West, an academic, what a hell of a career. Oh, Princeton, okay. I think we're gonna have, I had not seen you.
I didn't see the photo yet.
Yeah.
You see, the problem is...
That's beautiful acting, actually.
Yeah. Now
Beautiful acting.
Or even like Milo goes, you gotta meet my friend Cornel. Oh, I can't wait he's here. Oh.
But you see, here's the thing, right? What you're saying is, if I understand you correctly, forgive me for summarizing, you're saying, I just don't believe that everyday people are that prejudiced on an everyday basis.
Including employers.
Republicans, I would agree with you. It's the Democrats that have the problem. You read this Robin DiAngelo book, and she's talking about how she's uncomfortable around black people. She's got these negative suppositions, and she puts it down to being socialized into white supremacy. It ain't. It's her. She has a problem, and she's constructed this whole... This is why Democrats are always banging on about feminism and about rape culture and all the rest of it, because they think that all men are like Clinton, Weiner, and Weinstein, and we're not. They think that all men are like their men.
But I think
much of this racism that comes, actually, because the reason I'm saying this is what a lot of the statistics suggest, he's going to be right about this, is that employers and people in general do seem to net discriminate against blacks. And so it kind of gives the lie to what you're suggesting, which is...
You're talking about when they're named LaQuisha.
I'm saying
when they're named Michelle
Well, I'm saying
Obama,
they may well discriminate against blacks, but it's probably Democrats
They've
doing
got
it.
empirical studies that you can send in white persons for a job or housing, and they find a place, and you send a black person in, and they say there's none available whatsoever.
That's a valid example.
That's outright.
Although he is right that this
this
study says nothing about the names, and I do think that people are making not necessarily racial, or at least not solely racial judgments when they see a name like LaKeisha or whatever.
It's a beautiful name.
Yes, but they may be making economic judgments about that person. They may be
true.
making social judgments about that person
True.
that are connected to race, but are not necessarily completely completely about race. And the studies you're talking about, I've read them. They don't acknowledge and they don't mention whether names were blacked out. So it.
Right.
Excuse the expression, but forgive the expression. But they don't say what whether the names were withheld, and all they say is that people were not told. Right. So this is the big open question.
Isn't it interesting though when we discuss racism, we're always thinking about white people. Like if I ask you if America's racist, you don't think do Mexicans
racist
in South Central dislike blacks?
The most racist.
The
most racist group in America.
White people.
No.
The most racist. Talking about how Latinos.
The most racist group in the country
are.
are.
Our brain doesn't go there immediately.
But it should go across the board. All human beings have the proclivity toward racism.
Should it not go solely where the evidence leads?
And the evidence is very important. No, it's not natural, but it has been chronic because the culture itself reinforces it.
But you believe something.
You have to unlearn that.
Well, this is coming from a left-wing academic tradition that says that these things are culturally determined, they're socialized, that our
Well, it's
basically
not just
all
left
part of
wing.
the.
I think it's more than just left wing. I think there's some truth.
Well, when you
but I want to hear your.
it was
counter,
my
I want to hear your
it was my
counter-argument,
mistake
though.
to say left-wing academia when I meant academia.
Academia.
It's just like, it's like,
I wish academia were left wing.
no,
Most
American,
of it liberal. Most
American,
of it liberal.
no, it's like,
Most
it's like
of it
American
liberal.
Vogue, which here
Not
we just
left
call
wing.
Vogue. You know, like.
No. Chomsky is left wing, and that's not the mainstream.
Well, in
American
your
Academy.
well, no, okay,
Yeah,
but you come from a particular. You're a real leftist, you know?
That's right.
And
We're
real
talking about real
leftists,
left.
I
Have
get
some
on
stuff,
great.
man. Have
Oh
some
well,
thing,
thank
man.
you very much. You see, real leftists, they love to share. What's not to love? Real.
Socialism works after.
Brilliant. No,
That's part of my Christian sensibility too, though, brother.
no,
Go
I
right
mean
ahead.
real old school leftists. I always get on with fine. It's the social justice warrior, you know, neoliberal, whatever that we probably have in common as a foe sometimes. You're perhaps going to say, or I've heard you at least on previous occasions suggest, that this 100% socialization model is very flawed in a number of ways, not least of which is we know people self-sort into in-groups along racial lines if left to their own devices, and it has very little to do with, you know, they're not inculcated into prejudice. We just know that human animals are like that. Boys will sit with boys and girls will sit with girls. You know, different racial groups sit together, and then at higher levels of abstraction, rich people will self-sort again. You know, whatever.
In the ancient world, they didn't even have a concept of race.
Absolutely,
So
but
in the medieval
but when
period,
the
they didn't have a concept
absolutely,
of race. So they wouldn't.
But when race,
isolate
but when
themselves based on
race
something
activists are ramming it down people's throats 24/7, it's very difficult to avoid the concept,
Well,
and
but the
therefore
modern
you
world
are going to
is-
sort that
is
way.
Focused on
And this
race
is
and white
well,
supremacy plays such an ugly role in the
the modern
shaping
world
of
is
the modern world.
fixated
That's
on
the
race in America because
Well, South Africa,
because
there's
left-wing
other places.
academics have insisted that it is so. I went to a very well-to-do. I went to private school briefly, but then I went to a academically selective school in Britain, right? So you have to pass a test to get in, and it was predominantly because of where it was, filled with kids from higher socioeconomic brackets, right? So maybe it had a slightly lower proportion of black students. But it is not the first thing that I remember about my friend Angelo, who, yes, did happen to play basketball the weekends and was, you know, listening to rap when the rest of us were not, and all the rest of it. But his skin color, his blackness, is not the first thing I remember about him when I think about him. But if you grow up in America, you have no choice.
Yeah, see that,
No choice.
In that instance, Britain is more healthy than the
But the
United
left, but what?
Well, I think
what,
Britain is
what,
so overwhelmed with class.
But what?
And they've got a lot of class.
Which is a
Absolutely.
much better
That's
way
true.
to organize
That's true.
things because you can switch classes. You can't switch
No, it's
races.
about
black guy says,
both of them
"Cornel,
can be
how are you?"
vicious. Both
And
of
he's
them
one of
can
you.
be vicious.
Yes, but the class system is vicious in
The
so much of a
working
more amusing and
class-
elegant way.
Precious in Britain. precious in Britain,
No. I mean, the class system
people
in
of
Britain
color
is
press-
so much more elegantly vicious rather than just, you know, this sort of like base bigotry of racism, you know? No.
Want to aestheticize the suffering away.
Classism is so much more fun.
But
And
back
by
to
the way,
Oscar Wilde again,
and
back
by
to
the way,
Oscar Wilde,
classism.
he was in love
and-
with the working class.
Yes, and you
my
know
brother.
why? And you know why? Because classism in Britain doesn't operate against the working classes. It operates against the middle classes. Because the upper classes, the aristocracy, and the working classes live in the same places. They have the same hobbies. They like the same things.
No, but the working class drops out of school, don't go to Oxford or Cambridge.
100%. But they are whipping the hounds while the lord of the manor is riding the horse. But they're in the same place. They have the same attitudes. They vote for the same political parties. The aristocracy and the working classes understand each other. This is admittedly prior to big, you know, inner city ghettos and stuff that the white working class
And Britain's undergoing transformation.
Right, the white working class got stuck in these big inner city ghettos that breaks that historic link between the aristocracy and working classes, which itself was a deliberate a deliberate concoction of the middle classes. But where I'm from in the countryside is the aristocracy and the working classes, and I'm from the latter group, who look at the middle classes, the doctors, the lawyers, the teachers, as the alien species, right? They're the weirdos. They're the other for us, right? So the class thing is much more complicated than you think and doesn't punish the people that you think.
But the irony is, there's more social upward mobility now in Britain than there is in the United States. And that's empirical study too.
Yes, but you're...
take it.
That's empirical study too. And that's sad.
And
But
forgive me for saying this,
That's
but it
true
is
for
the
working
left...
class, no matter what color they are, they can't.
I'm not placing this at your doorstep, but to speak in ugly generalities, your side of the, for want of a better expression, political divide, your side of the fence on a lot of this stuff, refuses to bear responsibility for its role in perpetuating the relevance of race in public life, if this white supremacy thing, right, if society were racked with it, if it ran through society like a red thread, and it was an inescapable thing holding people down, why is race such a perpetual problem here when it is, comparatively speaking, not in Britain? When Britain had slavery for just as long, Britain had, Britain did all the same kinds of things.
The answer to that question, my brother, is this. Britain didn't fight a civil war over an attempt of a South, the Confederacy, to engage in violent insurrection or overthrow the United States government to enslave black people in perpetuity.
But you think that makes the
difference? That cuts so deep in the collective self-understanding of a nation.
But maybe it was just the South didn't want to be bossed around by the North.
No. The Constitution of Jefferson Davis and Alexander Stephens said we're fighting for our freedom. Our freedom is defined, white freedom is defined by the enslavement of these people in perpetuity, forever, ever, ever.
Okay, agreed.
That's what Lincoln said, if I could maintain the Union without freeing one slave, I would do it.
That's true, because Lincoln was a statesman who was trying to preserve the Union and was not an abolitionist.
But my question is this, right?
If not an abolitionist. Slaves in the South. Why were all these poor Johnny rebels fighting so a rich guy can maintain his Ferrari?
That's a good question. That's why you had mass departure in the Confederate Army as white working class people more and more felt, what am I fighting for? I don't own these slaves. And I am actually still being marginalized, but they were fighting, holding on to their whiteness. Now, you see, part of the problem in talking about whiteness is very important.
Who knows this in Camden, New Jersey?
Whiteness is an ambiguous thing. You see, whiteness is an ambiguous thing.
Asians are white now.
In the mind of many people,
Jews are. No, Robin DiAngelo says this without saying it.
Whiteness equals white supremacy. Now, I don't agree with that.
I don't agree with that. But my question,
I think whiteness equals human beings who have been constructed under this racial category, some of whom choose to support white supremacy, all benefit, others are against. You got Diderot, you got John Brown, you got Lydia Maria Child. These are white brothers and sisters who died fighting for black freedom.
But you're saying
that's a moral choice. That's a moral choice.
But my question was different. My question was different. My question was about
1,000 was total, but I don't know, 150,000.
No, but you got to remember now, it was only until 1864 that the shift from preserving the Union to abolishing slavery took place. When Lincoln announced the war, it was not under abolitionist aegis. It was not to break the back of slavery. It was to preserve the Union. Now, how many black soldiers came in to the Union Army? 200,000 in 1863 and thereafter. 200,000 black soldiers who then fought with the white soldiers to break the back of the Confederate Army. You see, so in that sense, that's one of the big differences between Britain and the United States.
And I understand all of this. I accept all of this.
Well,
this is the point.
That's true, but
who
that
knows
was my
that?
great-grandfather.
But who knows that growing up?
I'm older than you are. That's my great-grandfather we talking about.
Who knows that growing up in Camden? Nobody.
Well,
they only know that
I wish more people did.
And maybe people should know their history better, but my point is this. People would not know about all of this historic racial animus, and I'm not saying that learning history is not important. I'm saying that if it were not continuously pummeled into them that they must define themselves by their race, and in many cases separate and segregate, as they now are on college campuses, asking for black only,
asking for their humanity.
Well, sure, that would be nice, but isn't that difficult in a cultural environment in which the left is saying kill all white men?
Left's not saying that.
Excuse me, I'm sorry. MSNBC is crowing about the browning of America.
Left, that's liberal.
Okay.
I'm left. You looking at a leftist, brother.
All right.
You looking at.
I understand.
Stanley Aronowitz.
All right. I understand that. And you know,
Reed,
and it makes me very sad. I'm very regretful that your faction is shrinking while the liberal social justice whatever thing is rapidly expanding and pushing you guys out of the academy, even you, right? Whether it is old school feminists or you or whatever, you know, your views are becoming unfashionable and being replaced by conspiracy theory and whatever. But what I'm saying, my point,
we got to fight almost all conspiracy.
My point was
yes.
you guys need to fight this too. And this race baiting, right? You need to fight the race baiting because somebody growing up in Camden does not know the history of the American Civil War. What they know is that Beyonce does a video that, you know, the message of which is don't trust cops and they're against you. Somebody growing up in Camden
need to make that
knows,
video for the folk themselves to come to terms with that because they experience it every day in their lives.
do you know what? I don't know if that's 100% true. Look.
It's not 100% true. You're right, but it is largely true. Most black people have some memories of being mistreated.
Right, but they're living in a high crime area.
No, but I'm talking about black folk.
No, but black people growing up,
even middle class.
Black people growing up in America today.
You'd be surprised.
Yeah, of course, but everybody does.
No, you all don't. You don't have to worry about the police pulling you over.
Everybody has their own.
You have to worry about the police pulling you over.
Yes.
Everybody has their own damage
because of the color of your skin.
Well, I was punk and I had a lot of tattoos.
But everybody,
everybody. There's different markers.
Everybody has their own damage.
Color of my hair.
I don't. If you're gay, you're going to deal with a lot of whatever.
Absolutely, homophobia.
Okay,
it's a vicious thing.
Well, it's not that big a deal anymore. Let's just be completely honest.
That's not true.
Oh,
that's not true.
Excuse me, as a gay man, my lived experience says otherwise, so you actually have no right to speak on this subject.
That's the liberal. I'm not going to let you get away with that. I'm not letting you get away with that.
Excuse me, I actually have to say that since you're not a gay man, it's actually the time for you to be silent right now.
That's when I start talking. That's when I start getting louder.
But
I hear you. I see the point.
If you're not constantly reminding people of this stuff, here's the problem, okay? And it's the problem with I hope you won't mind me using him like this because I try not to use my loved ones as props, but I will just as an example.
Get it, your husband's black.
No. I wasn't gonna say that. He grew up, had some ups and downs in his family life, lived in group homes,
In which part of the country?
New Jersey.
So from Jersey?
Bad bits of really bad bits of New Jersey, bad life and a bad bit of New Jersey. About as bad as it gets.
Camden, New Jersey?
Briefly, I think, yes.
Ooh,
so all kinds of stuff like that,
right? Huff from Camden, the genius that he was, and is.
Did not believe, the way he tells it, did not believe all these messages he was constantly getting from other people about how his potential to flourish was foreclosed by his skin color, and instead decided,
That's good.
And work to pay his way through. And he's about to get his PhD.
Wonderful.
From nothing.
Wonderful.
With no help from anybody, right? This is an incredible life story. My question is, and it's one of the reasons that I fell in love with him because he's such an impressive and incredible person.
He's got determination. He's got unbelievable talent.
Right. So for the people who aren't strong, and the people who aren't,
because everybody's not strong as he is.
No. What does it do to them when they're told that their future is foreclosed by their skin color?
They should never be told.
What does it? How does it?
They should never be told.
Right.
They should never be told.
So the race talk stuff.
Wrong. It's negative.
Doesn't the race talk?
And it inhibits people being able to flower and flourish.
Then we're in agreement.
Well, no,
we're in agreement, and it's the liberals who I think we both detest in different measure.
I think we both have a very similar critique of liberalism and neoliberalism.
It sounds like
in that sense.
It sounds like we do. It sounds like we do. In fact, the only thing we may disagree on is economics. So you should get to that. But
1% who own 41% of the wealth, and the 3 individuals who own
I don't care. I don't give a shit. I don't give a shit.
That's grotesque wealth inequality.
Yeah, but it's true of mathematics.
I don't care.
One tiny group has the Fields Medal, while all of us other people are fighting to get a.
That's not fair. I want a Purple Heart. Why can't I have a Purple Heart? I'm brave.
The Purple Heart, they earn it. They earn it. A lot of these rich people don't earn it. They just grow up in inherited wealth.
Okay, so which
2/3 of the world's billionaires are bootstrap billionaires.
We're talking about the 0.1% of the United States, where the vast majority are tied to inherited wealth. That's not meritocratic at all.
It takes quite a lot of fortune. Listen,
meritocratic.
You grow. Look, I have known.
Will something to your grandchildren. The money still comes from a meritocracy.
That is meritocratic, and in addition to that, I have known.
You have to give it up when you die?
So the grandchild is a recipient of your efforts, and therefore that's meritocratic without them exerting any effort at all?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
Yes, it is.
No.
Michael Young is turning.
When we die, the money just vanishes?
Do you know how hard it is growing up as a billionaire? I have had friends, not talking about me, of course, but I've had friends who have, every rich kid, and you see this in Hollywood, right? With kids who grow up with no consequences to their behavior, no responsibility, no practical limits to what they can spend, no practical limits to what they can do. They all end up dead. They're all drug addicts or whatever.
You can be middle class.
Yes, but the pressures in those kinds of.
The poor seem to share that.
All I'm trying to say, yeah, well, the rich and the poor
the
share
unemployed,
a lot.
basically.
And look. I mean, America's class system is just money, and it operates very similarly to the old British class system, where the people at the very top seem to understand the people at the very bottom. Why? Because they both have a lot of free time. They both spend disproportionately on, or at least spend a significant slice on. Drink, drugs, on rock and roll, right? Drink, drugs, and rock and roll.
And
in a way, the middle class, in a way, the anxious middle classes do not. You know,
poor, more homeless, and the well-to-do has many, 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 many homes. That's
well,
a big difference.
What I'm
You'd agree with that?
Well, the homeless have a lot of bridges.
you know how expensive it is maintaining a yacht?
Back to Voltaire.
Even a small yacht. Even a small yacht. It's very expensive to keep it
guys,
afloat. You know.
This is a speakeasy.
But the point,
what we're doing here is illegal. Okay, it's free speech prohibition. So the cops are going to be here.
Good. We're breaking the law.
In about
breaking the law.
6 minutes.
In the name of Jesus, Socrates, Martin Luther King Jr., Harvey Milk.
We'll put Oscar Wilde in there.
Oscar Wilde.
I pay off the cops, so
Cheers.
I know when their shift is. But they're going to be here in a few minutes. I got one question I'm dying to ask you.
NYPD must love you.
Socialism
I'm sure you're fine.
versus.
They know me from dragging me to jail so many times.
You're old friends now. Do you have
yeah,
your
room
own?
in the custodian
You got your own cell, haven't you? Like, you got your nameplate. You got your own toilet seat.
So I got ready for my Motown songs that I'll sing right when I get there with Brother Carl and the other. But go right ahead. I'm sorry.
Socialism versus free market. The thing I like about the free market is it seems more natural. It seems more based on if you work hard.
That's the police.
Then.
Oh, there it is right there.
Then you'll be successful. Whereas socialism, the big state saying, I'm going to feed all these people. I'm going to handle this. I'm going to redistribute equality. That sounds to me like playing God. So isn't socialism more blasphemous? And isn't the free market closer to God and the Bible?
I mean, you make the point that Friedrich Hayek makes in The Road to Serfdom, 1944. He said, look, morals and markets are spontaneous and organic. States intervene and they act as if they know more than they could ever know, which is godlike in that sense. And there's some insights in what Hayek's talking about. There's no doubt about that. But the difference is this, though, brother. The difference is this. One, you notice in every capitalist society, the thing that matters the most is national security and military. That tends to be not operating based on capitalist principles. That's very public centered.
What about Mao's army and Stalin's
army? We're talking about the United States, we're talking about Britain. These are public institutions because what matters most is national security. Now, I come from the legacy of Martin Luther King Jr., right? Poverty, racism, materialism, and militarism. Poverty, for me, is a matter of national security, just like military. Therefore, the state has to play some role to make sure these precious kids of all colors living in poverty have access to some resources, quality education.
We're in agreement on that. We're in agreement on that.
Okay,
but there's a big gulf, isn't there, between robbing people of their ability to pursue their own good in their own way, but also of their ability to strive.
Yes, I agree. I agree with that.
By universal basic income terrifies me because it is a specter of immiseration. What it threatens to do is to take half the population who say, you know what, fine, I can live off that, I'm good, and make them, as we started this conversation talking about, unhappy. Because they don't have anything to,
It's fascinating you tied to happiness.
Right.
And that's very American. America is the only society in the history of the world tied to
life,
the pursuit of
liberty,
happiness.
and the pursuit of happiness.
happiness.
And do we talk about that happiness? Not very much. Not very much. Not as much as we should.
That's
Why?
True.
Because
That's
the only version of Christianity in this country that is true to the spirit of the Christian church, as I see it, are the black churches.
Well, the best of the black churches.
The best of the black churches.
The worst of the
where
black
you
churches.
still have the music, the joyfulness,
the,
the happiness,
the spirit,
the love, the energy,
the commitment to justice, Amos, Esther, Jeremiah, Jesus.
The best black churches are the only places, the white evangelical places in America are funless and bleak and dour and dreadful.
Cool.
No.
It depends on which ones. Depends on which ones.
Very articulate speakers. I noticed they never stutter.
But you go to the best of the black churches, or occasionally if you go to, let's say, I think he's a cardinal now, Cardinal Donato in Houston, Texas, who is building these big Catholic cathedrals because of all the Filipino immigration. They don't have anywhere to go to church on Sundays. Everything's overflowing. These churches too can be lively and fun, all the rest of it, but really it's just the black churches. That pursuit of happiness.
And you got my dear brother, Father Flager, Michael Flager in Chicago, St. Sabina. He's an Irish brother, black church, in the legacy of Martin Luther King Jr. Another example of whiteness as a force for good tied to love and justice.
That sounds like the motto of America.
Whiteness is a force for good. No, he'd agree with you. He probably agrees with you. You've written something. You've written something very similar to that. I'm sure I've read it.
Guys, sirens.
They're here for us.
We gotta get out of here, guys.
We gotta go.
It's 6:30. Let's go. Go out that side door there by the curtain.
So, if you enjoyed that clip,
Then subscribe to Compound Censored using this promo code.